System Shock 2 and Bioshock are two of my favorite games of all time. I first played Bioshock when it came out in 2007 and it subsequently blew my teenage mind, and I finally got around to doing a full playthrough of System Shock 2 early last year. Both are masterclasses in integrating story with gameplay and creating worlds for the player to explore as they see fit. Bioshock in particular was able to inspire a wide range of games, media about games, and dozens of YouTube commentary videos picking apart the third installment of the franchise. And now, how many games have we seen do that whole destroyed Art Deco thing that Bioshock did, or try to invoke System Shock 2 or Bioshock into design of their games for brownie points? If it wasn't obvious already, Bioshock is the spiritual successor to System Shock 2. They were even made by the same person and studio, Ken Levine and Irrational Games respectively. These two games share a lot of traits and even some of the same assets. No, really. In some ways, Bioshock is closer to a remake than a spiritual successor to System Shock 2, or perhaps someplace in between a reimagining and a spiritual successor, if that makes any sense. Levine et al. Took everything that worked in System Shock 2 and made it into Bioshock, with a few key tweaks that helped Bioshock become one of the greatest games ever made out of the ashes of a cult classic that was System Shock 2. It's pretty cool to look at all the places where you can see the inspiration from System Shock 2 and Bioshock, or even the places where things were overtly rolled over from the last game. System Shock 2 and Bioshock share a lot of the same story elements, and they have similar plot arcs, and even some of the location and set pieces are reminiscent of one another. Let's start with comparing the relationships the player characters have with their antagonists. Both Goggles and Jack have an open line of communication with their respective antagonists, and are even similar in how they turn out to be unwillingly doing the bidding of their antagonists for the first parts of both System Shock 2 and Bioshock. Both antagonists have their own goals, in which the player character is a means to. Both Charlatan and Frank Fontaine have ways to keep the player character in check in the event that they try and disobey them, and they will try and outright dispose of the player characters when they outlive their usefulness. While in Bioshock it's more obvious, as Fontaine overtly uses a mental kill switch on Jack, which becomes the focus of two separate levels, Charlatan can and will strip you of your cyber modules, experience points in System Shock 2, if you choose to disobey her orders. This is best seen when you try and find out what happened to Charlatan's previous pawn, and she takes away 10 cyber modules that you found on their bodies. Just a nice little reminder of who is in charge on the Von Braun. There's also an uncanny similarity in the level motifs and even the pacing of the levels. While it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, you'll find yourself in a lot of similar places between both games. This is prevalent in the early game where you start out in medical and shortly find yourself where the cargo is kept. Well, yeah, I'm reaching a bit here, but I couldn't help but notice this during my first playthrough of System Shock 2, that the areas in the early parts of the games are similar. Both games also have their midpoints in a sort of entertainment area, and while the gardens area of System Shock 2 has you making a chemical mix to kill something nasty and is earlier in the game, Bioshock also has you making a chemical mix. However, this time around you're trying to unkill something, which is the trees in Arcadia, since Ryan released something nasty in the air. The ends of the game are their own though. Bioshock had its trip through the Proving Grounds and that Fontaine fight nobody's particularly fond of, while System Shock 2 had the crazy flesh palace that you end up killing so hard that Charlatan is able to up and break reality and nearly becomes a god. I think System Shock 2 had the better end of the two. I don't consider any of this too surprising or particularly copy and paste, since both games take place in an entirely inclusive city-like setting with no means of getting supplies from the outside world, so they need to basically have everything inside of them for the people living there. There's also the matter of how Bioshock and System Shock 2 do their storytelling through audio diaries, journals, and so on. Audio diaries are definitely more effectively realized in Bioshock, but both games use audio logs in order to give exposition and more information about the world to the player without making them stop everything they're doing or read a wall of text. You still have to fiddle through menus in System Shock 2 to get them started, but by the time Bioshock came around, it was seamless. System Shock 2 still had a plain text email or two lying around, but both games also do other similar storytelling bits, like the whole ghost hallucination thing to tell bits of exposition or give contextual hints that wouldn't make sense in any other way. I wasn't sure why you got them in System Shock 2 at first, until I looked it up, and apparently it's because your cybernetic rig that you got is so advanced it can detect residual psionic projections of the recently deceased people's psyches. In Bioshock, it's justified as a side effect of consuming Adam that once was in someone else's system, which makes you inherit some of their memories along with their genetic code. Both both are a little bit of a stretch, but I appreciate the effort to avoid heavy-handed tutorials or insultingly obvious tooltip hints. Another thing that Bioshock improved upon was that audio diaries were better contextualized in the game compared to System Shock 2. While Bioshock has advertisements for the audio recorder everywhere, and it's explained in that book that a few of us read that Andrew Ryan wanted to have just about everything recorded for the historical purposes of Rapture, in System Shock 2, a lot of audio diaries will leave you saying, hey wait, why didn't they just send an email of this? The first two Bioshock games were peak audio diary before they fell off in Infinite with voxophones, which were not only poorly contextualized into the world, but didn't make any sense in a world where there were still people around to talk to in order to get exposition, in addition to the omnipotent demigod following you around who's familiar enough with the city to exposit at you all day long for some reason. Hey, wait, sorry, we've already done this video before. Let's get back onto this video. There's quite a few gameplay features that are carried over from System Shock 2 to Bioshock. I was almost shocked by some of these things, and I even found myself saying things out loud such as, hey wait a minute, that's the same security camera noise they used in Bioshock, when I finally got around to playing System Shock 2.
You can transfer power at the engine core on deck 1, which will get the elevator up and running again. But you can't use the elevator to get...
Just a bit border. How do you like that, mister?
In addition to various stock noises Irrational had from System Shock 2, like in the security cameras, the security systems act in a similar manner in both games. The cameras pan around a fixed point or a point you're likely to come across, like just about every other camera in video games, and you get a split second to get the heck out of its line of sight before the security system raises the alarm. Both can be hacked to your side or outright destroyed to varying levels of effectiveness. What you get for interacting with them varies on which game you're in. Tripping the alarm in System Shock 2 makes a lot of loud noises and alerts every last baddie in the area to exactly where you are. Whereas in Bioshock, if you're caught, there will be a specific type of enemy, the flying turret, that will come after you in droves and are a pain in the butt if you don't have the right plasmids. However, if you're caught in Bioshock, you can just go to this kiosk and pay money to disable the alert because Adam Smith is the biggest daddy of them all in Andrew Ryan's grand experiment. Both security systems can be hacked with their respective annoying minigame, with mixed results. System Shock 2 gives you a temporary reprieve from the entire security system on that level, where a successful hack in Bioshock will just turn that particular device to your side, from turrets attacking enemies to security cameras summoning the flying turrets to attack unlucky splicers that wander into your newly claimed turf. Both games have a lot of hacking in them, and it's always going to be a chore. Both games have these tedious, annoying minigames which share the trait that there are times that they will be outright unwinnable, getting you an instant security alert at the end of the minigame, which eventually got fixed in Bioshock 2. You can also hack the vending machines in both games, which acts as your main means of procuring items other than scavenging, since no one's really around to sell things to you because everyone is either dead or actively trying to kill you. Both games also share a very similar combat system. You're given a traditional suite of firearms and melee weapons, plus some pretty solid supernatural abilities that run off a mana-adjacent bar. Different types of enemies are affected by different types of ammunition you can load your weapons with. There's standard munitions, anti-personnel ammo, and armor-piercing rounds, plus all the types of ammunition associated with certain special weapons. Which ammo you use can be a deciding factor in whether or not you're able to take down a particularly tough enemy, but it's not impossible to kill something with the wrong kind of ammo. It's sometimes there will be situations where you're unloading all of your armor-piercing ammo into a large, fleshy target because you don't have any anti-personnel ammo on you right now, and if you don't shoot something at the bad guy, it's going to kill you in a couple seconds. Both games let you upgrade your weapons too, with System Shock 2's upgrades being a skill check and Bioshock having a one-time weapon upgrade station at various points in the game. Psychic abilities and plasmids are similar enough from the get-go, however, they're much more important to both the game and the story in Bioshock. In System Shock 2, you can get away with not using a single psychic ability outside of the tutorial, which you don't even have to do the psychic abilities tutorial if you don't want to, and you don't even so much as to ever equip the Psyamp. Whereas in Bioshock, you're going to need your plasmids to get out of the tutorial area, and they act as an integral part of the game, with a lot of levels being centered around, we need to go get this plasmid or else we cannot continue. Both occupy the same role as being a non-weapon alternative to combat, but also can be used as a way to enhance conventional combat by using them as stuns or a damage over time when you're shooting at an enemy. They run off mana, which can be a lifesaver when you're all out of useful ammo, but you need to take out a guy or three. Abilities are complemented with passive abilities in the form of implants and gene tonics, which can be found scattered across levels in both games or even synthesized artificially at times. Another gameplay trait that both games share is the way the levels are designed. The Shock games both feature empty, sprawling, non-linear levels that have parts blocked off until you can complete certain objectives. Other than that, each level is your oyster and exploration is very rewarding. You'll be hard-pressed at first to get around as everything and everyone is stronger than you, but as you progress through the game, you'll find yourself becoming more bold in your exploration. Both sets of maps are heavily used for storytelling and world building, with diaries you can find unrelated to the main story and scenes laid out before the player for a little bit of exploration. You're also free to revisit nearly anywhere in both Rapture or the Von Braun later in the game to complete side objectives or to get collectibles and power-ups that you might not have been able to get when you were first there for one reason or another, usually being I was almost dead and really needed to go to the next level to try and get some health items. This makes the game maps feel even more open and real without having to go through the open world route for level design. Each level is memorable in its own way, with some levels like Fort Frolic being fixtures throughout all of gaming for its amazing level design. Of course, there are plenty of differences between the Shock games too. Bioshock is a very much more fully realized version of System Shock 2, which was already phenomenal to begin with, but it could always stand for improvement. The most obvious place you can see this is how the games treat their weapons. System Shock 2 is very much in the RPG camp of using and obtaining weapons. Each weapon can be categorized into a skill family such as energy weapons or explosives. You'll need to spend cyber modules on those areas of skill to be able to use the weapons in each category, which can end up being quite the investment when you get into late game weapons. In addition to that, you're also going to need to dump a lot of points into repair as weapons degrade and you need to be constantly upkeeping them if you want them to work. The higher the condition of your weapons, the more consistently they will fire and the less likely they are to jam in the middle of a fight. You're also going to want technology and hacking skills if you want to upgrade your weapons at all. Bioshock is almost entirely the opposite of System Shock 2 when it comes to your weapons. Once you have the weapon itself, you're set. No skill points needed, no repairs, no research to identify what the heck that alien weapon thing is. Bioshock takes care that each weapon is also introduced with a special moment that lets you get acquainted with how it works and what its strengths are. Upgrades are done at the Power to the People stations and require no skill checks to use. You also don't have to play an annoying hacking minigame to finish the modification once you're upgrading a weapon, and you get this cool cosmetic change to the weapon too that signifies, yeah, this is upgraded now, look at it go. The weapons in Bioshock are certainly less nuanced than System Shock 2's counterparts, but you'll always be focused on what is the best thing for a fight based on your available ammo instead of, is this stupid thing gonna break on me in the middle of this? Then there's how the games do skills and passive abilities. System Shock 2 allows for you to have a number of spec'd into skills, plus a couple of permanent bonuses. But your main modifiers are implants, which can be found across the Von Braun. Implants run off a power supply that you'll need to recharge regularly if you want them to work, which can be recharged at power stations around the Von Braun or with one of your energy weapon batteries if you're in a pinch. Contrast this with Bioshock, where you get up to 18 gene tonics instead of maybe 1 to 2 depending on your armor, and they vary from physical, engineering, and combat bonuses which don't need any additional attention once you've found and equipped them. There's a whole slew of things gene tonics can help the player with, from safe cracking to being able to turn invisible when you hold still, which can be a lifesaver for when you trip an alarm but you're low on health and ammo. On the note of safe cracking and other forms of hacking, while System Shock 2 does a traditional skill check whenever you want to attempt to hack, Bioshock will let you at just about any hackable device in the area, as there's no real skill levels to check in the game. Hacking devices just get harder and harder as you get later into the game, and hacking related gene tonics are designed to offset that. Bioshock's lack of skill leveling leaves just about everything open to the player, but you have to have the right gene tonics for certain things or else it's going to be a very uphill battle. You can still hack that end game safe with no hacking gene tonics, it's just going to be a feat of near superhuman skills and reactions. Every weapon and plasmid is available to you from the outset, and every device you can find can be tinkered with. Have fun with it. You might have noticed a lot of the major deviations from System Shock 2's original formula were ways to outright improve the game without oversimplifying or diminishing the entertainment value of any of the game's mechanics. System Shock 2 to Bioshock is one of the very few and very best examples of streamlining a game for play on a game console without dumbing it down. Maybe that's in part because the 6th and 7th generation of game consoles had more buttons than their predecessors did for mapping commands onto, in addition to some game design tricks to help make sure all the good stuff can get in. You'll have no problems using a controller to do things like swapping guns, changing ammunition types, checking the map, looking at objectives, listening to audio diaries, and all on the fly, save for that bit about looking at maps, which thankfully pauses the game so you can take a minute to orient yourself. This is a huge improvement over System Shock 2, where just about everything needed to be done through a menu. A good chunk of the time in System Shock 2 ends up being devoted to fiddling about in the menus, and I don't even want to try and think about managing System Shock 2's inventory and mechanics using a controller. Aside from mouse accuracy, Bioshock is one of those rare occasions where a controller is just as comfortable for operating a shooter as the keyboard and mouse is. Bioshock manages to streamline the gameplay of System Shock 2 without making it feel like a lesser experience. You still get a wide range of weapons with multiple types of ammunition, in addition to a slew of supernatural abilities you acquire over the course of the game. Audio diaries are easier to access than they were before, and they're just as interesting to listen to. Also, the outright removal of the inventory system means there's 100% less fiddling around playing the world's most annoying game of Tetris before having to guess which weapon you're going to be able to find later on in the level. My favorite example of streamlining between the games with better effect is how research is done between the games. Research is the most tedious thing in System Shock 2, with its only saving grace being that you can do it in the background while you're doing other stuff, or you can just go and make yourself a snack while you left goggles in the relative safety of the science storeroom. First, you have to find an item on the corpse of an enemy or a rare spawning weapon or armor, then you have to open your research menu and start the process of researching it, and you'll need certain chemical reagents in order to progress. Some of the ones you'll need for researching late game items are also only found in one place in the entire game, so pray that one of them doesn't accidentally clip through a wall and disappear into the void. By the way, even with all the right skill points in all the right places and having all the chemicals at the ready, this takes forever to do. Bioshock pretty much gets rid of this and changes the way you get damage bonuses through research with the introduction of the research camera. The research camera is a streamlined and wholly better way to do research in your game. You get the camera relatively early in the game, and it's the center of your main objective for the Neptune's bounty level, so you'll learn to use it quickly. There's no such tutorial or area that gets you to use research in System Shock 2 outside of a tooltip or two, so I hope you read that manual if you're going in blind. Bioshock's research process has 3 steps. 1. Point camera at the thing you want to learn about. 2. Take lots of pictures while you fight the thing. 3. Get prizes. Heck, you can even do a little research of dead enemies you can find, and you can skip the XP bar filling after every camera shot if you don't want to wait around between clicks. While it goes without saying, the almighty algorithm demands I make these videos nice and long, so let's go over the graphical and aesthetic improvements between the games. A game's fidelity is certainly going to improve over the nearly 8 years in a console generation that System Shock 2 and Bioshock had between them, but the overall aesthetic was improved upon to give Bioshock a unique look. System Shock 2 takes place on a big spaceship that looks like just about every other big old spaceship in a sci-fi related game. System Shock 2 did have something of a unique body horror theme in its enemies, like the many, but it wasn't all that much to write home about aesthetically speaking. Bioshock's enemies, on the other hand, are distinct just as much as the city of Rapture is. While it's a pretty simple thing to add, the party masks and the telltale visual effects of the mutations the splicers have make them distinctly Bioshock, even more so with spider splicers, big daddies, and little sisters. And then there's Rapture itself. Rapture is one of the more unique settings in all the video games. The combination of underwater and Art Deco is something so uniquely Bioshock that almost any given level in the game is immediately recognizable. Ayn Rand's Art Deco Atlantis, with all its free market totally working as intended, was a fresh new look for games in a wash of Desert Storm and World War II with all the browns, yellowish colors, and grays. Don't get me wrong, Bioshock had a whole lot of brown in it too, but there were golds, reds, and other colors that popped out to help give the setting character and to draw the player's eye to the more important stuff. Also, you could tell by the looks of things that it wasn't always like this in Rapture, and this had been going on for a while. Bioshock also takes a great leap forward in storytelling. System Shock 2's storytelling was already spectacular and pushed things forward for all the video games that weren't exactly text-heavy RPGs or FMV games, but Bioshock took everything that System Shock 2 had established and ran all the way home with it. Bioshock not only did a better, more nuanced job on redoing certain plot beats, but also incorporated more interesting subplots, which System Shock 2 was lacking in at times. Bioshock was able to take the plot skeleton of an adventure romp through a destroyed city and add themes, better characters, more environments that told stories all by themselves without expositing at the player, and outcomes based on the choices you made. Also, it gave us Sander Cohen, which is always a nice thing. It's a little ironic when you think about it, but we've come full circle. Bioshock was the spiritual successor to System Shock 2, And now after all these years, System Shock 3 is coming out as arguably the spiritual successor to the Bioshock franchise now that it's gone dark for the last 6 years and change. System Shock 3 is going to be a thing 20 years since System Shock 2 came out, and I can't be more excited for it. It's being made by Other Side Entertainment, which is comprised of people who worked at Irrational and Looking Glass, and the project is being headed up by Warren Spector, the inventor of the immersive sim. At this rate, we'll likely get Bioshock 3 in 2027 alongside another Deus Ex reboot where Eidos will get squeamish again and pull the plug before we can even finish the series. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Even if one game is better than the other, thanks to Levine and Irrational having all the experience from working on the previous game in addition to better technology available, that doesn't make System Shock 2 any less of an amazing game that's worth your time. So many of the concepts that are commonly used in games today were pioneered in System Shock 2, and it stands on its own as a phenomenal experience even today. You can check it out in the previous video I did, which will be linked below in the description and at the end of this video. If you haven't played System Shock 2 or Bioshock for some reason, I've also included links to purchase the games through the Humble Store, which not only helps out this channel, but also will give a portion of your purchase to charity. You can redeem the Humble Store games on just about any platform you'd like to. I'd suggest downloading them to GOG, as they automatically add in special patches that let System Shock 2 run better on modern systems. Before we wrap this up, I'd like to pose a question to you. Do you think that in a similar manner in which Souls-like games are a subgenre of action RPGs consisting of games with similar traits to the Dark Souls franchise, there's a subgenre of the immersive sim called Shock-like, in which games similar to System Shock 2 and Bioshock exist? Other examples of Shock-likes might include 2017's Prey and other immersive sims that have a focus on special abilities and trapping you in an enclosed world where the protagonist is isolated from any help. Let me know in the comments. That's gonna do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and don't forget to check out part 1 of this video if you haven't already. The next video coming up is going to be about the Thief franchise, specifically which series of games is its true successor, and will feature Dishonored pitted against the 2014 reboot that Eidos Montreal did. I hope I'll see you there. In the meantime, sign-offs are stupid and I don't really know how to do them, so here's a cat video. Please don't. Frisk, you're not allowed to touch the sugar bowl. You know what that'll do. Yeah, there you go. Off you go.